flowers were wrong. Tio stood behind the glass display case of his bakery, fingers pressed flat against the cool marble countertop, and stared at the arrangement of white peonies his assistant had placed in the window. They were perfect, symmetrical, exactly what he had ordered for the engagement party tonight, and they made his stomach turn in a way that had nothing to do with the pregnancy. He told himself it was nerves. He had been telling himself that for 3 weeks now. His hands moved automatically, wrapping a box of almond croissants for the morning rush, folding the pale pink tissue paper with a precision that came from 5 years of doing it the same way every single morning. His body knew this bakery the way it knew how to breathe. The warmth of the ovens behind him, the smell of brown butter and cardamom hanging in the air, the soft jazz playing from the speaker near the register, all of it was his. All of it was safe. And still, his chest felt like something inside it was leaning against a door that hadn't opened yet. His phone buzzed on the counter. He glanced at it without picking it up. Nathan, a text, running a little late from the venue, don't stress. His thumb hovered over the screen, then he set the phone face down. Tia was 7 months pregnant and engaged to be married in 6 weeks. Tonight's party was supposed to be the beginning of the last chapter before the wedding. His mother had already bought her dress. His best friend Zara had already written a speech. The caterers had already been paid. Everything was in place the way those peonies were in place, arranged, deliberate, pointing towards something beautiful. Hi viewers. If you ever had a feeling something was wrong before you had any proof, drop a 1 word in the comments, just 1 word describing that feeling. I want to know. He pressed one hand flat against his belly. The baby moved, a slow rolling shift that felt like someone turning over in sleep, and Tio exhaled through his nose. Quietly, the way he did everything lately. He had become very good at being quiet. Zara came through the back door at 7:42, already in her dress, already spectacular, her locks pinned up and her earrings catching the bakery light like small fires. She stopped when she saw his face. Tio, I'm fine. Nobody who's fine says they're fine like that. He handed her the croissant box and turned back to the display case. I need to finish the mango tarts before Deja gets in. Zara set the box down. She walked around the counter, stood beside him and looked at his reflection in the glass. Talk to me. There is nothing to talk about. Your hands are shaking. He looked down. They were, just slightly, just at the fingertips, but they were. He pressed them together and the shaking stopped. Nathan's been distant, he said finally. Zara was quiet for a moment. That particular quiet that meant she already knew something or suspected something and was deciding whether to say it. Distant how? Late nights, short answers. He put a password on his second phone. Tio turned to look at her. He told me it was for work. Silence that followed was its own kind of answer. Tio looked back at the peonies. I'm probably overthinking it. Probably, Zara said, but she didn't sound like she believed it. She sounded like a woman trying to hold open a door she already knew was closing. He finished the mango tarts. He got dressed in the back room, pulling on the white button-down shirt that now stretched across his belly with a tension that felt almost poetic, and the dark blazer Nathan had picked out for him last month when they'd been happy, or when things had looked like happiness from the outside. He stood in front of the small mirror above the sink and looked at himself for a long time. 7 months pregnant, 31 years old, his own bakery, an engagement ring on his left hand that cost more than his first car. He looked like a man who had everything. He picked up his keys. He did not feel like a man who had everything. The venue was 20 minutes away. Nathan had texted again at the venue now, where are you? And Tio had typed back on my way and stared at those 3 words like they were a question he hadn't answered yet. On my way to what exactly? On his way to a party. On his way to a future. On his way to find out whether the feeling in his chest was fear or instinct, and whether there was even a difference anymore. He drove past the turn for the venue. He didn't decide to. His hands just kept the wheel straight when they should have turned left, and he kept driving, and he told himself he was just taking the long way, that he needed a few more minutes, that the party would start without him, and that was fine. It was fine. Everything was fine. He ended up parked outside the hotel where Nathan had said he was doing a final walkthrough with the event coordinator. The lights in the lobby were warm. Tio sat in his car with the engine running and told himself to leave. He sat there for 4 minutes. He counted them, then he got out of the car. The lobby smelled like lilies and expensive candles. The front desk clerk smiled at him with the particular brightness reserved for people who looked like they belonged. Tio walked through the lobby like he had a destination. He took the elevator to the 3rd floor because that was where the private event rooms were, where Nathan had said he was doing the walkthrough, where everything was fine and settled and in place. The door to event room 3C was slightly open. Tio heard Nathan's voice first. Low, warm, the way it sounded when Nathan was relaxed, when his guard was completely down, when he was somewhere he felt safe and unseen. Then he heard a laugh that was not his own. Soft, familiar in the way that certain things are familiar before you can name them, before your brain catches up to what your body already understood 3 weeks ago when the phone got a password. Tio pushed the door open 2 inches wider. He saw enough. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. He stood in the gap of that doorway for what felt like a full minute but was probably 4 seconds, and he looked at Nathan, and he looked at the person with Nathan, and he felt something inside his chest go very, very still. Not break, not shatter, just go still. The way a clock goes still when the battery dies, not broken, just stopped. His hand found his belly without him telling it to. The baby moved again. That same slow, sleepy roll. Tio took one step back, then another. He turned around and walked back down the hallway at the same pace he had walked in. Steady, even, one foot in front of the other like a man who knew exactly where he was going. He pressed the elevator button. The doors opened. He stepped inside. He watched his reflection in the elevator's mirrored wall all the way back down to the lobby. He walked out through the lilies and the expensive candles and the bright smile from the front desk clerk, and he got into his car, and he sat there with both hands on the steering wheel and the engine off, and the feeling in his chest had a name now. He had been right, that was somehow the worst part. Not what he saw. Not the sound of Nathan's laugh in a room where he thought he was unseen. The worst part was that Tio had known. He had folded the tissue paper every morning and arranged the peonies, and answered the texts and tried on the blazer, and he had known, underneath all of it, in the place below words, in the place where the body keeps its truths before the mind is ready for them. He had known. And tonight there was an engagement party in his name with his mother in her new dress, and Zara's speech already written and the caterers already paid, and Nathan was in room 3C of this hotel, and Tio was sitting in a parking lot with one hand on his steering wheel and one hand on his belly, and 7 months of someone else's future pressing against his ribs from the inside. His phone lit up. Nathan again. You almost hear, babe, the guests are starting to arrive. Tio stared at the message for a long time, then he opened his contacts. Scrolled past names he hadn't called in months, past his mother, past Zara, past the caterer and the florist and the wedding photographer. He stopped on a name that had 3 numbers behind it, not one person. 3, the same name listed once because that was how they had given it to him, together, as if the 3 of them had always understood that when one came, all 3 came. His thumb rested over the name. His jaw tightened, he pressed call. It rang once, just once, then someone picked up, and before Tio could speak, a voice, deep, quiet, certain as a closing door, said, "We were wondering when you'd call." And something in Tio's chest, that thing that had gone still in the elevator mirror, moved again. Not like the baby moved, differently, like something waking up. He closed his eyes. "I need a favor," he said. A big one. Pause on the other end of the line was short, clean. Then the voice said, "When and where?" And in the background, Tio could hear 2 other voices, identical and yet distinct, asking no questions at all, just the sound of movement, of chairs being pushed back, of 3 men already standing up. Tio opened his eyes and looked at himself in the rearview mirror. He looked like a man who had just made a decision. For the first time in 3 weeks, the feeling in his chest had a different name. Nathan was still laughing when Tio had turned away from that door. That was the part that stayed. Not the image, not the details, the laugh, easy and open and completely at home in a room where Tio did not exist. Tio replayed it in the car without meaning to. The way your tongue finds a sore tooth even when you know it'll hurt. The way you keep opening a wound just to confirm it's real. He pressed his palm flat against his belly and concentrated on the baby's movement instead. Slow, rhythmic. Uncomplicated in the way only the very young can be uncomplicated, because the baby did not know yet that the world was full of rooms with slightly open doors and laughs that were never meant to be overheard. Tio had met Nathan at a rooftop birthday party 4 years ago. He remembered it in pieces the way you remember things that felt important at the time. Nathan in a cream linen shirt. Nathan with a drink he'd been holding without sipping. Nathan looking at Tio from across the rooftop with an expression that suggested he had been waiting specifically for Tio to appear, which Tio had understood even then was almost certainly not true, but had felt true enough to act on. They had talked for 3 hours without sitting down. That was the thing Tio always remembered. 3 hours standing at the edge of that rooftop with the city spread out below them, and neither of them had wanted to sit because sitting would have meant making this smaller than it felt. He had believed in it completely. He drove away from the hotel slowly, not in the direction of the venue, not yet. He needed 10 more minutes. He allowed himself exactly 10 minutes to feel whatever was happening in his body right now, the low, grinding grief of it, the way it sat in his stomach alongside everything else his body was already carrying, and then he was going to stop. He was going to breathe. And then he was going to do something that he had not planned on doing when this morning started, but that felt now like the only possible response to a world that had just rearranged itself without asking him. He was going to walk into that party, and he was not going to walk in alone. His phone rang. He looked at the screen, not Nathan. The name on the screen was one word, June. He answered. "Tell me you're still in the city," Tio said. "We never left," June said. The word "we" was not an accident. It never was with them. "Where are you right now?" "Hotel parking lot on Meridian." "Don't move." A pause. The sound of something in the background, movement, voices, the particular organized efficiency of 3 people acting with a single shared mind. "We'll be there in 12 minutes. I don't need you to rescue me." "I know you don't," June said, and his voice was steady the way only certain people's voices are steady, not because nothing was happening, but because they had decided their steadiness was more useful than their feelings right now. "But you called, so here we come." Line went quiet but didn't disconnect. Tio drove out of the parking lot. He circled the block twice. He stopped at a red light and looked at a couple crossing the street. Older, unhurried, the woman adjusting the man's collar with the automatic intimacy of 30 years, and he felt the grief move through him cleanly, like water, like something that was passing through rather than building up. He was going to be okay. He did not know yet exactly what okay looked like from here, but he could feel the shape of it. Somewhere past tonight, past the peonies and the speech Zara had written, past Nathan's face when he saw Tio walk in, past all of it, something was waiting that was not this. Something that had room in it for him and for the baby and for a life that did not have a password on a second phone. He pulled into a gas station and parked. A minute later his phone showed a text from H1. Silver sedan, 2 minutes out. They arrived in one car the way they always did. 3 doors opening at nearly the same moment. 3 tall figures stepping onto the concrete, and Tio watched through his windshield and felt something in the region of his sternum loosen by 1 degree. He got out of his car. June reached him first, not running, just walking with the kind of pace that covered distance without appearing to hurry. He looked at Tio's face, the whole of it, for a moment that lasted just long enough to take inventory. You saw something, June said. I saw enough. No one asked for details. That was the thing about them. They never pushed the wound to see how deep it went. They just stood there in a gas station parking lot under fluorescent lights. The 3 of them ranged around Tio like something that had been designed specifically for this. And Tio looked at Seo and H1 and June, and something that had been pulling very tight in the center of him finally eased. There's a party tonight, Tio said. My engagement party, and I need a date. He paused. 3 dates. H1's mouth moved at the corner. Not quite a smile, something more contained than a smile. 3 dates, identical ones. I want to walk into that room and I want Nathan to see me, and I want him to understand that I am not the person he thought I was when he decided room 3C was a good idea. Silence that followed was brief, then Seo said quietly, precisely, what time does the party start? Tio looked at his watch. 40 minutes. Seo nodded. Like 40 minutes was more than enough. Like this was a simple logistical matter, and not the most devastating night of Tio's life so far, and somehow that calm landed on Tio's nervous system like a hand on a shoulder. Then we need to move, June said. They moved. And Tio following 3 men into a car that smelled like cedar and cold air, with his baby shifting inside him and his ring still on his finger and Nathan's laugh still living somewhere in the back of his head, felt for the first time all evening like something was going in the right direction. He didn't know what direction that was yet, but it was not backward. Seo drove. He always drove when something needed to be done efficiently and without drama, which was most things, in Seo's understanding of the world. The city moved past the windows in long amber streaks, and Tio sat in the back between June and H1, which was not something he had planned and which should have felt strange but did not feel strange at all, because strange was room 3C and this was simply 3 people who had shown up when he called. You need to tell us what you want tonight to look like, June said, not a command, a practical question. His voice had a quality to it that Tio had always found difficult to name. It was not loud, it was not aggressive, but it had weight, the way certain materials have weight, the way solid things settle differently than hollow things when you set them down. I want to walk in, Tio said. I want to be seen. I want Nathan to look at me and understand that whatever he thought I was, whatever version of me he was comfortable enough to betray, that version is gone. H1, who had been looking out his window, turned to look at Tio. H1's eyes were the kind of dark that felt evaluating, like he was always running a quiet calculation just slightly behind the surface of his expression. And then what? And then I end it, publicly, quietly, with my head up. With us there, June said. With you there, Tio confirmed. June nodded. H1 nodded. From the front seat, Seo said nothing, but lifted 2 fingers off the steering wheel in a gesture that meant understood. They had known each other for 14 months. It had started as a business connection. The Triplets owned a Korean restaurant group that had contracted Tio's bakery for pastry service, and Tio had shown up to that first meeting expecting businessmen, and encountered instead something that felt, from the very first handshake, like a collision with gravity. Not romantic, not immediately, just the absolute certainty that these 3 men were going to matter to him in ways he could not yet map. He had been with Nathan then. He had stayed with Nathan. He had done the right things and attended the right parties, and kept the right distance from 3 men who represented a kind of pull he was not ready to name. He was namming it now, not yet out loud. Not tonight, which was already carrying enough weight. But inside, in the place where he kept his true things, Tio let himself acknowledge that the reason he had not deleted their number was not purely business. There's something else, Tio said. Tell us. Seo said from the front. Nathan doesn't know about you. Not really. He knows I have business contacts. He doesn't know that I, Tio started again. He's going to assume. When he sees you 3, he is going to assume things. Good, June said simply, and did not elaborate, and did not need to. Tio looked down at his hands. The ring caught the streetlight through the window and threw a small, cold glimmer across the seat. He looked at it for a moment with the detached focus of someone studying an object that belonged to someone else. I was happy, he said, not to any of them specifically. To the air, to the car, to whoever was listening. I actually thought I was happy. No one offered him a correction or a consolation. H1 put his hand lightly, briefly, with zero sentimentality on Tio's forearm, then removed it. That was all. That was enough. The car stopped at a light. Rain had started on the windshield, soft and irregular, and the wipers moved in a rhythm that was almost like breathing. Can I ask you something? Tio said. Yes, all three said at different fractions of the same second, which made Tio almost smile despite everything. Why did you answer on the first ring? The question sat in the car for a moment. Outside, the light changed. Tio eased the car forward, then June said, because we always answer for you. And the simplicity of that, the total, unperforming simplicity of 7 words said in the same tone. Someone might use to state a fact about weather reached somewhere in Tio that the grief had not yet gotten to. Somewhere still intact and quiet and waiting, and stayed there. The venue appeared ahead of them. Through the rain, its lit windows looked like something from a photograph, warm and composed and completely unaware that the evening inside it was about to change shape. Tio straightened in his seat. Okay, he said, his voice was steady. He was still wearing Nathan's ring. He was 7 months pregnant and his engagement party was 40 seconds away and the man he had called was not Nathan. He was steady. One more thing, H1 said, turning to look at him with that quiet, calculating gaze. When you walk into that room, don't look for him first. Tio frowned. What? Don't look for Nathan when you walk in. Look at the room. Look at your guests. Look like a man who belongs there, which you do, and let him find you. H1 paused. Make him come to you. Tio considered this, then he nodded. The car stopped. The engine cut. Rain tapped against the roof in the moment of silence before anyone moved. Tio turned around from the front seat and looked at Tio directly. Tio was the quietest of the three and said the fewest words and meant every single one of them. He said, "You ready?" Tio exhaled. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go." Doors opened. The rain was light, barely anything, just enough to make the air feel washed and new. 3 men stepped out with the synchronized ease of people who had long since stopped thinking about how they moved together. And then Tio stepped out, one hand briefly on the roof of the car for balance, and stood up straight, and the 4 of them stood there in the parking lot of his engagement party in the rain for 2 full seconds. Then June said, "Together," and they walked toward the door. And the door opened, and the light and the warmth and the sound of 100 people who did not yet know what was about to happen poured out into the rain. And somewhere inside that light, Nathan was waiting. The room was everything Nathan had planned, soft gold lighting, long tables with white linens, a bar along the far wall where people already stood in small, comfortable clusters with champagne glasses catching the light, music low enough to talk over. Flowers everywhere, not Tio's peonies, different flowers, Nathan's choice, calla lilies, which Tio had told him once he found cold. Nathan had excellent taste in everything except the things that mattered. Tio walked in between June and H1 with Tio a half step behind, and the shift in the room was immediate and physical, the way temperature shifts when a door opens in winter. Not dramatic, not theatrical. Just the simple, involuntary response of 100 people registering the entrance of something they had not expected. Heads turned. Conversations didn't stop, they lowered. Glasses paused mid-lift. Eyes moved from Tio to his left, then to his right, then to the space behind him, and did the arithmetic that faces always do when confronted with something identical in triplicate. Tio did not look for Nathan. He looked at the room the way H1 had told him to. He looked at it like a man who had every reason to be here, and none of the reasons he had arrived with this morning, and that particular quality of presence, unhurried, unashamed, slightly lifted at the chin, communicated something to the room before a single word was spoken. His mother found him first. Celestine, 62, impeccable in a wine-colored dress that she had indeed already purchased, crossing the room with the focused efficiency of a woman who had been watching the door for 20 minutes. She reached him and looked at his face and then looked at the 3 men beside him, and her expression moved through several things very quickly before settling on a composure that was one of the most impressive things Tio had ever watched her perform. "Baby," she said, taking his hands. Her fingers were warm. Her eyes were asking 17 questions simultaneously. "Mama," he kissed her cheek. "These are friends of mine, June, H1 and Tio." She looked at June, then H1, then Tio, then back to June. "Friends," she repeated, with the particular intonation that only mothers who raised you with absolutely no illusions can achieve. "Business colleagues," Tio said smoothly. "They wanted to come celebrate." June reached out and shook Celestine's hand with a warmth and a directness that Tio had seen disarm more resistant people than his mother. "He's told us a great deal about you. It's a real pleasure." Celestine's composure upgraded slightly. She was not immune to a well-delivered compliment from a man who looked the way June looked, and Tio filed that away as information. "Well," she said, "welcome." And then under her breath to Tio, squeezing his hand once before releasing it, "We're going to talk." "I know," he said. She moved away. Tio exhaled. H1 touched his elbow briefly. "You're doing fine." And then they moved deeper into the room, and the room continued its quiet, ongoing recalibration around their presence. Zara appeared from the left, stunning and already holding what appeared to be her second champagne. And when she saw Tio, she did a thing with her eyebrows that communicated an entire paragraph of reactions in under half a second. Okay, she said, arriving in front of them, looking each man up and down with the frank appraisal of someone who had exactly zero patience for pretense. I'm Zara. I've been Tio's best friend since the 8th grade. I love him more than most things on this earth. And I will need you to tell me everything. Tio, who had not smiled at anything since the parking lot, produced from somewhere in the architecture of his face a small, genuine expression that Tio recognized as amusement. He told us about you too, Tio said. Zara pointed at him. I like you. Then she pointed at Hwan. I'm still deciding about you. Then she looked at June. And you are terrifying and I respect it. June's expression did not change, which somehow only confirmed what Zara had said. She pulled Tio aside by one arm, lowering her voice. Where is Nathan? I don't know yet. Something happened. Yes, how bad? Tio met her eyes. He watched her read his face the way she always could, the way she had been reading his face since they were 13 years old, sharing a lunch table and deciding they were going to be each other's people. She went very still. Oh, Tio. Tonight, he said quietly. Not here. Tonight I just need to get through this with my head up. Okay, she looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the 3 men standing a few feet away, polite and present and watchful, and something moved across her expression that Tio couldn't fully read. Reassessment maybe, recalculation. Okay, she said finally. Head up. She straightened. She fixed his collar. She pressed her forehead briefly to his. You are the most beautiful, most stubborn person I know, and I will burn this entire room down for you if needed. That won't be necessary. Just saying it's available. He almost laughed. Almost they turned back. The room continued its motion around them, guests circulating, laughter lifting and falling, the catering staff moving in careful patterns between the tables. Tio accepted a glass of sparkling water from a tray without looking at who offered it. His hand was steady. And then across the room, he saw Nathan. Nathan stood near the bar, talking to a couple Tio recognized as his co-workers. Laughing at something one of them had said. He was in the grey suit Tio had picked out with him. His hair was perfect. His teeth caught the light when he laughed. He looked like a man who had no idea his entire evening was about to change, which was either the performance of someone who knew exactly what he had done or the blindness of someone who had never imagined being caught. Tio watched him for 3 seconds. Nathan did not notice him yet. He was in his comfortable posture, his party posture, the one he wore when he knew he looked good and the room was on his side. He turned finally, and he saw Tio. The laugh stopped. Not abruptly, it tapered, the way sound tapers when something interrupts the frequency. His eyes tracked from Tio to June, then to Hwan, then to Tio, then back to Tio. And in Nathan's face, in the geography of his features, something moved that was not anger and was not guilt, but was something older than both of those things, recognition, not of the triplets specifically. Recognition of what Tio standing there with them meant. Recognition of what it meant for a man to arrive at his own engagement party flanked by 3 men who were not his fiancé, and not his family and not, from the look of them, simply colleagues. Nathan set his glass down on the bar. He started across the room. Tio watched him come. He did not move toward him. He stood with his feet planted and his back straight and one hand resting on his belly, and he watched Nathan walk the full distance of the room and arrive in front of him, and he let Nathan be the one who crossed all that space. Hwan had been right, make him come to you. Tio, Nathan said. His voice was controlled but not quite all the way controlled. Something was working at the edges of it. You're late. No, Tio said. Nathan's gaze moved to the triplets. A beat. Who are friends of mine. The same word he had used with his mother, but differently weighted now with Nathan, with the particular gravity of a word used as a door rather than an explanation. Nathan looked at him. And Nathan was smart. He was genuinely smart, so Tio could see him running the calculation, weighing what he could say against what would reveal that there was something he needed to defend. Can we talk? Nathan said. Low, private, the voice he used when he wanted to manage something before it became a situation. We are at a party, Tio said. Let's enjoy the party. And he turned away. He turned away from Nathan and turned back to the room, and accepted the arm that June offered him with the naturalness of long practice. Though this was the first time, though they had never done this before, and he walked with June toward the window where the city spread out beyond the glass and the lights were amber and warm and completely indifferent to the fact that everything was in the process of changing. Behind him, he heard Nathan say his name once more. Quiet, almost like a question. He did not turn around. The baby moved. Low and insistent, a push against the inside of his ribs, and Tio pressed his free hand there and felt the movement and thought, I know, we're okay. He wasn't sure yet if that was true, but he was going to make it true. 45 minutes into the party, Tio was standing by the window with a glass of water and a plate of food he was not eating, and Tio was beside him saying very little, which was exactly what Tio needed. The party moved around them like weather, groups forming and dissolving, music shifting from something instrumental and restrained to something with a little more pulse beneath it, as the champagne made the room warmer. Celestine had found a group of women to speak to, and was performing the role of composed mother, with the dedication of someone who had decades of practice in not letting her face say what her mind was doing. Zara was dancing with someone near the back of the room, watching Tio from across the floor with the steady, peripheral focus of a person running two conversations at once, and Nathan was standing near the bar again. He had not left the bar in 30 minutes. He was on his third drink, and he was watching Tio with an expression that had moved through several stages in the last 45 minutes. Confusion, irritation, something that looked like the beginning of panic, and had now settled into a careful, performative casualness that was almost impressive, except that Tio could see through it completely. He had always been able to see through Nathan's performances. He just hadn't understood until tonight that this meant he had been watching a performance for longer than he knew. "Eat something," Tio said beside him, quietly, without looking at the plate. "I'm not hungry." "The baby is." Tio looked down at his plate, picked up a small piece of grilled chicken, ate it without tasting it. "How do you always know what to say?" "I said eat," Tio said. "That's not complicated. You know what I mean." Tio was quiet for a moment. He had the kind of stillness that didn't feel like absence. It felt like volume turned down on purpose. "I listen," he said finally. "Most people don't." Across the room, June was talking to Tio's cousin Deja and her husband, and whatever he was saying had them both thoroughly entertained, which would have been remarkable on its own, but became somehow more remarkable when you understood that June was not a man who wasted words. Every sentence he produced had been considered. He was choosing to make Deja laugh specifically, which meant he had assessed Deja as someone whose goodwill mattered to Tio, and acted accordingly. Tio had not asked him to do that. Hwan was closer to the entrance, standing with the slight lean of someone who appeared relaxed but was actually tracking everything. Tio had noticed this about Hwan early, the way he positioned himself in rooms, always at an angle that gave him the widest possible view, always with his weight on his back foot, always reading the traffic of people and energy around him. He wasn't guarding anything specifically, he was just paying attention, all the time, to everything. The three of them together in this room were like the difference between a lock and a key, each one incomplete without the other two, but when they moved in the same space, something clicked into place that felt structural. Tio's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. He took it out. "Nathan, a text. Can we please talk, away from everyone? Please." He read it twice. Then he put his phone away. "He's texting you," Tio said, not a question. "Yes." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to let him sweat for another 20 minutes. Tio picked up another piece of chicken, ate it, and then I'm going to go find him, and then I'm going to say what I have to say, and then we're leaving. Tio turned to look at him directly. His face was even, composed with the quality of still water, not because nothing was moving beneath it, but because the surface had been chosen deliberately. "How are you feeling, honestly?" Tio thought about the honest answer for a moment. "Like someone rearranged all the furniture in a room I knew by heart," he said. "So I can walk through it, but I keep reaching for things that aren't in the same place anymore." Tio nodded. He looked at the room. He said, "That's a good way to put it. Doesn't feel good." Tio agreed. "But it's accurate, and accuracy is where you start from." A man Tio recognized as one of Nathan's co-workers, a broad-shouldered man named Marcus with a lineup that was aggressively perfect and a watch that cost more than most cars, approached them with the ease of someone who moved through social spaces without friction. He shook Tio's hand and glanced at Tio with brief, uncomplicated appraisal. "Tio, congratulations, man. This is a beautiful event." He paused. "Where's Nathan? I've been trying to pull him away from that bar for an hour." "He'll be around," Tio said pleasantly. Marcus looked at him for a half-second too long, reading something in the pleasantness. Marcus was shrewd in the way certain people are shrewd, not analytical, just perceptive in the way animals are perceptive, by instinct rather than logic. "You good?" he asked, dropping the social register by one notch, just man to man. "Getting there," Tio said, which was honest, which Marcus seemed to recognize. He nodded. Moved on. Tio watched him go. The party continued. Outside the window, the city moved in its own indifferent rhythm, lights shifting, traffic threading through the grid, the great ongoing noise of a world that did not stop for private grief or private decisions, or the moment when a man looked at his own engagement party and understood it was not going to end the way it had started. He felt June arrive before he saw him. There was something about the way June occupied space, a density, an intentionality that registered before the visual. He appeared at Tio's left with a glass of water of his own and said nothing for a moment. Standing beside him the way you stand beside someone at a window when the view is both beautiful and painful, and you understand that they don't need commentary, just company. Then June said, "He's watching you." "I know. He's been watching you this whole time." "Good," Tio said, and surprised himself with how much he meant it. June turned to look at him. His expression was the one Tio privately thought of as June's reading expression, the look of someone who was assembling information, taking something apart to understand how it worked. "You know this doesn't have to happen tonight. You could leave right now, take tonight back. If I leave, he wins by default. Doesn't win anything. There's nothing to win here. There's my dignity," Tio said quietly, "and I'm not leaving without it." June looked at him for a long moment. Something moved in his expression that Tio couldn't fully name, something that sat in the territory between respect and something else, something with more weight than respect, something that required more from the person feeling it. Then we stay, June said. Tio nodded. He looked at the room one more time. He placed his empty plate on a passing tray. He straightened his jacket, which involved adjusting for the belly in the practiced way he had developed over 7 months, a small sideways shift, a tug at the left side. He took a breath. I'm going to find him, he said. Neither June nor Seo moved to stop him or to follow him. They stood there together, watchful and present and completely uninterested in going anywhere, and Tio understood from this that they would be here when he came back, that this was not something they would leave, that the word together, which June had said in the parking lot in the rain, was not decorative. He walked across the room. The crowd parted naturally around his movement, the way crowds part around someone moving with purpose, and Tio kept his chin level and his hands easy at his sides, and he found Nathan near the edge of the bar, finally alone, standing with a drink he wasn't finishing, his eyes tracking Tio's approach with an expression that was trying very hard to be neutral. They stood face to face, an arm's length apart. The noise of the party cushioned them on all sides, creating a kind of privacy that was not privacy at all, which was precisely why Tio had chosen this location. He wanted witnesses who weren't watching. Tio, Nathan started. Yet, Tio said, I'm going to talk first. Nathan closed his mouth. Tio looked at him. He looked at the grey suit he had picked out and the face he had spent 4 years learning and the hands that were wrapped around a drink they didn't need, and he felt the grief move through him cleanly one more time. Not a wave, not a crash, just a current, just the natural passage of water through a space that used to be solid. I was at the hotel, Tio said, quietly, evenly. Room 3C, I saw you. Nathan's face went through several things in under 2 seconds. The particular sequence of expressions that happens when someone who has been keeping a secret understands that the secret is over, not all at once, but in stages, each stage its own small collapse. Tio, not angry, Tio said, and this was true, which was the most surprising thing about it. The anger was there somewhere, but underneath it was something quieter and more final. I'm not angry, I'm just done. Nathan set his glass down. You don't understand. It doesn't matter what it was, Tio said. What it was is finished. Nathan looked at him. His jaw moved. He looked, for the first time in 4 years, for the first time in this conversation, like a man who did not know what to say. This was unusual for Nathan. Nathan always knew what to say. Nathan had spent their entire relationship knowing what to say, and the fact that he did not know it now told Tio something about the size of what had just been named. What about the baby? Nathan said, not a question. A last attempt at a hold. Tio looked at him for a long moment. He felt the baby move inside him, that slow roll, that warm weight, that entirely separate life doing its entirely separate things. Baby is mine, Tio said, and the baby is fine. He took the ring off. He set it on the bar between them without ceremony, without theatre, without making it anything more than what it was, the return of an object that had never fully been his, or that he had never fully been deserving of, or both. It made a small, clean sound on the bar. Final, like a period. Nathan looked at it. He did not pick it up. Tio stepped back. Enjoy your party, he said, and turned away. He walked back across the room with his spine straight and his chin level and both hands at his sides, and when he reached the window where June and Seo and H1 had gathered, without plan, without being asked, simply because this was where Tio was going and they had made a decision to be where Tio was going, he exhaled. Done, H1 said. Done, Tio said. The 4 of them stood there for a moment in the amberlit room with the city outside the window and the party still moving behind them, and the ring still sitting on the bar across the room where Nathan had not picked it up and might not pick it up for a long time. Zara appeared beside Tio. She looked at his face. She looked at the triplets. She made a sound in the back of her throat that communicated complete understanding and zero surprise. My car or theirs, she said. Theirs, Tio said. She nodded. She took his arm. Then we go. They went toward the door, all 5 of them, and as they moved through the room, Tio did not look back. He did not look for Nathan's face. He did not check whether the ring had been picked up. He looked forward at the door, at the cool air waiting on the other side of it, at the city that would still be there when this night was over. But somewhere behind him, he heard Nathan say his name. Once. The way you say something when you understand you have lost the right to say it and say it anyway, because the loss is too new and the human impulse toward the thing you are losing is not yet finished. Tio's hand found his belly. He kept walking. The door opened. The air came in. The baby moved, and somewhere in the back of his mind, not yet fully formed, not yet ready to be examined, the thought that this night had taken something from him, but had also, in its taking, cleared space for something else. 3 men, 1 car, a city full of possibilities that did not require a password. He stepped outside, the door closed behind him, and whatever came next, whatever shape his life was going to take from this moment forward, whatever the baby would grow up knowing about love and courage, and the kind of people worth walking into a room with, it was beginning now, right now, in the rain. The rain had stopped by the time they reached the car, but the air still held the cold, clean smell of it, the kind of air that felt like something had just been washed away and hadn't yet been replaced by anything new. Teo got into the back seat. Zara climbed in beside him. June took the front passenger seat. Seo drove. Hwan sat on Teo's other side, and the five of them sat in the dark of the parking lot for a moment with the engine running and the heater beginning its low work, and the party still lit up behind the venue windows like a photograph of a life that no longer belonged to anyone in this car. Nobody spoke first. Teo was looking at his left hand, the finger where the ring had been for 11 months. The skin there was slightly different, not marked, not indented, just somehow softer than the rest, like a place that had been covered for a long time and was only now meeting the air. Zara reached over and covered his hand with hers. She didn't say anything. She just put her hand there, warm and solid and without condition, and Teo felt the gesture move through him the way warmth moves through cold, slowly, then all at once. "Need you to know something," he said, to the car, to all of them. No one told him to go on or stop or slow down, they just listened. "Not devastated," he said. "I know I should probably be more devastated than this, but I think I've been grieving this for 3 weeks without knowing what I was grieving. So by the time I saw what I saw in that room, I had already started the other side of it." He paused. "Does that make sense?" "It makes complete sense," June said from the front without turning around. His voice went directly into the space Teo had opened and settled there without taking up more room than it needed. "What I am," Teo continued, "is tired and hungry, and I want to sit somewhere that isn't a party." He looked at Zara. "And I want to eat something that isn't catering food." Zara's face broke into something that was relief dressed as laughter. "Now that," she said, "I can work with." Teo was already pulling out of the parking lot. They drove 20 minutes through the city and ended up at a late-night Korean barbecue spot that the triplets had what appeared to be a standing relationship with. Given the way the host at the door recognized them and said something quick and warm in Korean that made Hwan respond with a short phrase, and the closest thing to an easy expression that Teo had seen on him all evening. They were seated at a private table in the back, round, low-lit, with a grill already warming at the center. The kind of table that had been designed for a group of people who intended to be there for a while. Teo sat down, and for the first time in 6 hours, the tension in his back let go by some degree, and he understood from the relief of it how long he had been holding himself so carefully upright. "Order everything," Zara said, picking up the menu with the energy of a woman who had deferred her appetite for an entire evening and was now collecting. Teo ordered. He ordered in Korean precisely and without consultation, and what arrived over the next 15 minutes was an architecture of food: marinated short ribs, thin-sliced pork belly, scallion pancakes, bowls of white rice, small dishes of kimchi and pickled radish and sesame spinach arranged around the table like the points of a compass. Teo ate. He ate with the focused attention of someone whose body had been running on adrenaline and sparkling water for the better part of the evening, and the food was warm and deeply flavored, and the grill at the center of the table made the air around them smell like something celebratory, and nobody rushed him, and nobody filled the quiet with words that weren't needed. Zara, who had given her speech to a room that would now never hear it, quietly folded the printed pages of it and set them on the table beside her water glass. Teo saw her do it. He reached over and put his hand on the folded paper for a moment. She looked at him. "Reuse it," she said. "When you find someone worth it, I'll update the name and it'll be better." Teo almost laughed. The almost was very close to the real thing. The whole speech. "I put work into that thing." Hwan, who had been managing the grill with the quiet competence he brought to everything, placed a piece of short rib on Teo's plate without being asked. Teo looked at the plate, then he looked at Hwan. "You didn't have to do that." "I know," Hwan said, and went back to the grill. It was such a small thing. The smallest possible thing. A piece of meat moved from one surface to another by a person who had noticed that Teo's plate was getting low. But it sat in the room with a different weight than its size suggested, and Teo felt it in his chest in the place that had been quiet and waiting since the parking lot. The place that had moved when June said, "We always answer for you." The conversation found its own level. The way conversation does when the pressure of an event is removed, and people are warm and fed, and no longer performing anything for anyone. Zara asked the triplets questions with the unself-conscious directness that was her most natural mode, and they answered with varying degrees of detail. June with precision, Hwan with economy, Teo occasionally with the particular completeness of someone who had thought carefully before opening his mouth. The baby kicked. Hard. A sudden sharp movement that made Teo put down his chopsticks and press his hand flat against his side with a sharp exhale. The table went still. Zara said immediately, leaning toward him. "What's happening?" "Kicking," Teo said. He breathed out slowly. "Strong kick, it's fine." June had turned fully in his seat. His expression had shifted, not to alarm exactly, but to something that was alert in a different register than his usual alertness. Teo had set down his glass. Hwan had stopped moving entirely and was watching Teo with a focused stillness. The kick settled into a lower-grade movement, the rolling pressure that Teo knew well. He breathed out again. "I'm fine, the baby's fine, it just caught me off guard." That happen often? Tio asked. Getting stronger, Tio said. 7 months, they're running out of room. He looked down at his stomach with an expression that was tired and tender, and complicated in the way that only the relationship between a parent and an unborn child can be complicated. Growing too fast. Table was quiet for a moment. Then H1 said, in a voice that was quieter than his usual quiet, "What are you going to name them?" The question landed differently than H1 probably intended. Not because it was wrong, it was exactly right. It was the exact right question. The question that pulled the evening out of Nathan and the ring and the peonies and the hotel room, and placed it somewhere that was only about the baby. Only about the future. Only about the part of this story that was beginning rather than ending. Tio looked at H1. He hadn't decided. He had a list somewhere in his phone, a running list he had been adding to and removing from for months, but he hadn't decided because deciding felt like something you did when you were certain about the shape of the life the name was going to live in. And for 3 weeks he had not been certain about anything. "I don't know yet," he said. H1 nodded. Like this was perfectly acceptable. Like not knowing was a reasonable place to be. "You'll know," Tio said simply. Tio picked up his chopsticks again. He ate the piece of short rib H1 had placed on his plate. He looked at the table, at the food, at Zara's folded speech, at the warm low light, at 3 men who had gotten up from wherever they were and driven in the rain without asking a single question about whether they should, and he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. Not happy, not yet, but something adjacent to it. Something that was the room that happiness lived in before happiness arrived. He let himself sit in that room. Outside, the city continued. And Nathan was somewhere in it, at a party that was winding down, with a ring on a bar that nobody had moved, with the full understanding settling around him that Tio had not looked back. But Tio was not thinking about Nathan, he was thinking about names. The car was warm on the drive home, and Zara fell asleep in the back seat with her head against the window, and her shoes off and her feet tucked under her, which was how Zara had been sleeping in cars since the 8th grade. Tio sat beside her watching the city pass and feeling the weight of the evening settling into his body, the way weight always settles after adrenaline. Not dramatically, just gradually, like sand shifting in water until it finds the bottom. Tio drove. June was in the front beside him. H1 sat on Tio's other side, awake and not pretending not to be, and the quiet between them had the quality of shared air rather than absence. They pulled up outside Tio's building. Tio looked at the front door, the familiar brick, the low-lit lobby visible through the glass, the single potted plant his downstairs neighbor kept beside the entrance even in winter, and he felt the particular smallness of returning to a place that held the shape of your old life, and had not yet been updated to the shape of your new one. He hadn't told Nathan to leave. He hadn't thought that far. Nathan had a key. Nathan's jackets were in his closet. Nathan's things were on the bathroom shelf, arranged in the specific order Nathan always arranged things, and Tio would have to deal with all of that, just not tonight. Tonight he was too tired for inventory. June got out of the car first. He opened the back door and offered Tio his hand, which Tio took without ceremony and used to pull himself upright, because 7 months of carrying another person inside your body made getting in and out of low car seats something that required assistance, and no longer required pride about requiring assistance. They stood outside the building in the cool air. Tio and H1 came around from the other side of the car. Zara, woken by the stopping of the engine, appeared from the back seat with one shoe on and her locks listing slightly to one side, looking beautiful and rumpled and completely unself-conscious about both. "I'm staying with you tonight," she said to Tio. Not a question. Okay. She disappeared inside to get the elevator. Tio stood outside for a moment with the triplets. The city around them was doing what cities do at this hour, quieter than it appeared, lit from above and below, holding its breath before the next thing. "Thank you," Tio said. He said it to all 3 of them because it was true for all 3 of them, and he said it without qualification or excess because the evening had already been full of both. "Thank us," June said. "I'm thanking you anyway." June looked at him. That reading expression again. That particular quality of attention that Tio had learned to recognize as the thing June did when something mattered and he was deciding how much of what he was thinking to give to the air. He decided, apparently, to give some of it. "Tio, the baby needs a name and you need sleep. Those are the 2 things that matter tonight. Everything else is noise." He paused. "Understood." Tio looked at him for a moment. Then he said, "You sound like a doctor." "I sound like someone who is correct," June said. Despite everything, Tio laughed. It was short and it was genuine, and it was the first time that evening that the laugh and the feeling behind it were exactly the same size. Tio stepped forward. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a card which he held out to Tio. A business card, but with something handwritten on the back, a number different from the one Tio had. A second number. "That's my direct line," Tio said. "If anything happens tonight, with the baby, with anything." Tio took the card. H1 was last. He didn't speak. He looked at Tio in the way that H1 looked at things, fully, without the social habit of looking slightly away to ease the intensity of direct attention. Then he did something small. He straightened the collar of Tio's blazer, which had turned over at some point in the evening. Just that, just 2 fingers adjusting a collar. And then he stepped back and put his hands in his pockets, and his expression returned to its usual composed default. Tio felt that small gesture in a place that had no name yet. He went inside. The elevator was warm. Zara stood beside him without speaking, her hand through his arm, her other hand holding her second shoe, and they rode up together in the simple animal comfort of two people who had known each other long enough to stop filling silence with words that weren't needed. His apartment was exactly as he had left it that morning. The bakery receipt on the kitchen counter. The pregnancy pillow wedged against the left side of the bed. The half-finished glass of orange juice he had left beside the sink at 6:45 in the morning when the world was different, and he was going to an engagement party in a blazer Nathan had picked out, and the peonies were wrong, and he knew something was coming but could not yet name it. He picked up the orange juice glass and washed it. He changed out of the blazer, folding it over the back of the chair with the automatic tidiness that was just who he was, blazer or no blazer, crisis or no crisis. He put on the soft grey sweatpants and the oversized shirt that lived on the hook behind the bathroom door, the ones that accommodated his belly without comment, the ones that felt like actual rest. Zara had already commandeered the left side of the bed and was lying with her arms behind her head, staring at the ceiling with the expression of someone conducting a very involved internal trial. Tio lowered himself onto the right side. The pregnancy pillow found its position automatically. He lay on his side and looked at the wall, and the room was quiet except for the low ambient sound of the city through the window. Zara. Yeah, I don't regret tonight. She was quiet for a moment. Good. I think I knew for a while, I just didn't want to be right. People don't want to be right about the things that hurt. He was quiet. The baby moved. He put his hand on his belly in the dark and felt the movement and thought about names. The triplets, Zara said after a moment. Carefully, the way you step onto ice. What about them? Nothing, I'm just... She paused. I'm just saying, I've known you for a long time, and I've seen you with Nathan the whole 4 years of it. And I've never once, not a single time, seen you look the way you look when those 3 men are in the room. Tio did not answer immediately. What way do I look? He said finally. Zara turned her head to look at him across the dark. Like you're not managing anything, she said. Like you can just be there. He didn't respond. The ceiling above him was the same ceiling it always was. The city outside was the same city. Everything was in the same location it had been in this morning, and yet the room felt different. The way rooms feel different when you are different. When the person who moved through them yesterday was operating with a different set of information than the person who moved through them now. He thought about Hwan straightening his collar. He thought about Seo ordering food with the ease of someone who had registered what everyone needed without being told. He thought about June saying we always answer for you and meaning it with a completeness that had no performance in it anywhere. He thought about 3 doors opening at the same time in a gas station parking lot in the rain. Not ready, he said, to Zara, to the ceiling, to himself. I know, Zara said, that's fine, it's too soon. Nobody is asking you for anything, least of all them. He thought about that. Some sleep, Zara said, the baby needs it. Everyone keeps telling me what the baby needs. Because you need someone to tell you to take care of yourself, and the baby is the most irrefutable argument available. He almost laughed again. The almost was very close. He closed his eyes. He lay there in the dark of the apartment that was his, and only his now, and he breathed in and breathed out, and the city moved outside and the baby moved inside, and the thoughts eventually stopped presenting themselves one at a time and began to soften at the edges the way thoughts soften when sleep is approaching. His last thought before the dark got him was a name, not decided, not certain. Just a name, rising out of all the noise like something that had been waiting patiently for the noise to settle. He held it in the dark. It fit. 3 weeks later, Tio repainted the spare bedroom. He had been calling it the spare bedroom for 7 months, which was its own kind of dishonesty, because it had not been a spare bedroom since the 2nd trimester. It was the baby's room. It had always been the baby's room. He had just been afraid to commit the name to it the way you are afraid to write in pen when you still feel like you might need to erase something. He chose a color called Morning Fog, which was a pale green-gray that the paint chip described as serene, and which Tio had chosen because it did not look like a nursery color from a catalogue. It looked like the color of the air just after the city woke up and before anyone had made any mistakes yet. He painted it himself. Slowly, with the particular deliberate pace of a man who understood that this was not just a wall getting color, this was a decision. A declaration. He was doing the room, and he was doing it without Nathan, and he was doing it 7 months pregnant on a Wednesday morning with the windows open and a podcast playing low in the background and the smell of paint and open air mixing in a way that was almost pleasant. Zara had offered to help. He had told her no. Some things needed to be done alone, not because they were heavy but because they were yours. His mother had called the morning after the engagement party early, while Tio was still in bed with Zara breathing steadily beside him and the city just beginning its day outside. Celestine had called and Tio had taken the phone to the kitchen, and they had talked for 40 minutes in the quiet voice of a mother and her child the morning after something has broken. She had not said I told you so, because she was not that kind of mother. She had said, "I am so sorry, baby," and then she had said, "You are stronger than this situation," and then she had said, "What do you need right now?" And those three things in that order were exactly the three things that needed to be said, and Tio had loved her fiercely for knowing the order. Nathan had texted the morning after, then called, then texted again. Tio had read the texts the way you read something in a language you are in the process of forgetting. You can still make out the meaning, but the emotional weight it used to carry no longer connects. He had responded once, briefly, 3 days later. He had said, "There is nothing to discuss, but we can arrange for you to collect your things." Nathan had not responded to that for 6 hours, and then had responded with several paragraphs that Tio had not finished reading. He had blocked the number on day 5, not out of anger, out of the same clarity that had made him put the ring on the bar. There was nothing useful in the conversation Nathan wanted to have, and Tio had too many things ahead of him to spend his energy looking backward at a door he had already closed. He painted the wall in long, even strokes. The morning fog color went on smoothly, covering the old off-white in a single coat. He stood back and looked at it and felt something in his chest that was quiet and sure and his own. His phone was on the windowsill. It buzzed. He looked at the screen. CO, a text. "How is the room coming?" He had sent them a picture of the paint chip 3 days ago when he was still deciding. He had not asked for opinions. He had just sent it, the way you share a thing with people you trust without needing them to respond in any particular way. And CO had responded immediately with good color, and June had sent nothing but a single checkmark that somehow conveyed complete approval. And H1 had sent a picture of a small wooden shelf painted the same pale green-gray, which meant H1 had already found something to match it, and was already thinking about the room as a place that was going to have furniture in it. Tio had not known what to do with that, so he had saved the picture and thought about it, and then started painting. He texted back now, "First coat is done." "Looks right," CO responded in under a minute. "We'll bring the shelf Thursday if that works." Tio looked at that message. He sat down in the doorway of the baby's room with his back against the door frame and his legs out in front of him, and looked at the pale green-grey wall and thought about what it meant that 3 men he had known for 14 months were already planning to come to his apartment Thursday with a shelf for his baby's room. It meant something. He knew it meant something. He just wasn't entirely sure yet what to do with the meaning. He typed back, "Thursday works." And then after a pause added, "Thank you." And then deleted the thank you because June had told him not to, and added it back because he was not going to let June win every argument, even the ones June was right about. He sent it with the thank you. He pushed himself back up to standing and picked up the roller and went back to the wall. The baby had been moving differently in the last week. Less the rolling, sleepy pressure he had grown used to, and more a pointed, purposeful activity that felt like someone rearranging furniture. His midwife, a composed and deeply competent woman named Dr. Renata Osai, had told him at his last appointment that the baby was head down and positioning, which meant the last weeks were the preparation weeks, the weeks of getting ready for something enormous that was coming whether anyone had figured everything out yet or not. He had not figured everything out yet. He was figuring it out in the order it presented itself. The wall, the shelf, Thursday. The name, which had stayed with him since the night of the party, not solidified yet, just present, sitting in his mind with the patience of something that knew it was right and was willing to wait for him to catch up. His phone rang. Not a text, a call. He looked at the screen. "June," he answered, tucking the phone between his ear and shoulder without putting down the roller. "You're painting," June said. "Do you know, you always pause like that when you're doing something with your hands." Tio processed this. "You've noticed how I answer the phone." "I notice things," June said without apology. "How is the room?" "Green, grey and good," Tio said. He painted a stroke. "Why are you calling instead of texting?" "Because I wanted to hear your voice." "A beat, and because I have something to tell you." Tio set down the roller. He turned to face the window. The city was doing its midday thing outside, active, layered, indifferent. "Tell me." "Nathan came to the restaurant last night." Air in the room changed temperature by some degree. Tio stood very still. "To the restaurant," he said. "Yes, he said he wanted to speak with us. He said he had things to clarify." June's voice had not shifted in register or pace. It maintained its flat, factual steadiness the way a wall maintains its position, not because nothing is pushing against it, but because it is built for exactly this. "We asked him to leave. He, eventually." "What did he say?" June paused. One beat measured, things that were not worth repeating. He said them loudly. He has a version of events in which he is the person who was wronged, and he wanted to be sure we had heard that version. Another pause. We made clear that we were not interested in his version. Tio exhaled through his nose. He turned back to the pale green-grey wall. He looked at it for a moment. "He's not going to stop," Tio said. "He'll stop," June said. "People always stop when they understand that no one is listening. You sound very sure about that." "I am very sure about that. I have dealt with men who believe their version of events is the version that matters. The cure is consistent indifference." He paused again, and when he spoke next his voice had shifted by the smallest degree, not softer exactly, but less formal, less report and more person. "I wanted you to hear it from me before you heard it from somewhere else." Tio leaned against the wall beside the window. He thought about Nathan walking into the Triplets restaurant. Nathan, who had sat across from Tio for 4 years and known him in all the ways that 4 years of knowing someone makes you know them. The way he folded his tissue paper, the way he couldn't sleep with any light in the room, the way he pressed his hand against his belly when he was anxious. Nathan standing in a restaurant that was not his, trying to reclaim a narrative that had already moved past him. Not scared of him, Tio said. I know you're not. Just need him to understand that it's over. Understands, June said. He just doesn't like it. Those are different things. A pause. Are you okay? Question was direct and unhurried. It did not ask how are you, which was the social version of the question, the one that expected fine and meant nothing. It asked are you okay, which was specific and meant something. Yeah, Tio said, and meant it. I'm painting a wall and I'm going to have a shelf Thursday and I know what I'm going to name the baby and I'm okay. Silence for a moment. Then June said very carefully, you know the name. I think so. You going to tell us? Tio looked at the wall, at the morning fog color, serene and exact. Thursday, he said. He could hear June's exhale. Not a sigh, something quieter than a sigh. Something that sounded like a person holding a piece of information that mattered to them and being careful about how they held it. Thursday, June agreed. They stayed on the line for another moment without speaking. The city outside, the smell of paint, the baby doing its preparation week business inside him, all purpose and forward motion. Then Tio picked up the roller. See you Thursday, he said. June said, you will. Thursday came cold and clear, the kind of November day that had no apology in it, that simply arrived with bright light and hard air, and the particular sharpness of a city stripped of the softening effects of warmth. Tio had cleared the baby's room completely by the time they arrived. The old furniture was gone, he had sold it 2 weeks ago, and what remained was the pale green-grey walls and the wood floor and the window that looked out over the back of the building where the neighbor's garden was dormant and brown and somehow still holding its shape against the season. The knock at his door came at 10 exactly. Not 10:02, 10, because that was the kind of people they were. He opened the door, all 3 of them stood in the hallway. Zio and Hwan were holding a shelf between them, pale wood, long, with 3 short legs and a gentle curve along the front edge that Tio had not expected, that was more beautiful in person than in the photograph. June was holding a paper bag that smelled unmistakably like the sesame pastries from the restaurant's kitchen, and behind him, balanced in Hwan's other hand, was a small plant. A rubber tree, compact and dark-leafed, in a pale ceramic pot. Tio looked at all of this for a moment. You brought a plant, he said. Room needed something living, Hwan said, like this was obvious. Like you did not question the self-evidence of a plant needing to be in a room where a baby was going to live. Tio stepped back and let them in. They moved through his apartment with the ease of people who had been in it before, which they had twice for brief things, practical things, and who had paid attention when they were there. They went directly to the baby's room without being directed. They assessed the space with the efficient quiet of people deciding how something should be done before anyone had said anything about doing it. And then Seo and Hwan began the process of putting up the shelf with a level and a pencil and 2 screws, and a drill that materialized from somewhere. And June unpacked the pastries onto a plate in Tio's kitchen, and brought 2 cups of coffee from the French press on the counter, as though he had been making coffee in this kitchen for years. Tio sat in the doorway of the baby's room, and watched Seo and Hwan work and ate a sesame pastry, and felt like something from a dream he had been too tired to recognize as a dream. Tell me about your restaurant. He said. Seo looked up briefly from the level. Which one? Of them, all of them. You never talk about the business side. You never asked, Hwan said, masking now, so they told him. They told him while the shelf went up. Seo mostly, Hwan occasionally, June from the kitchen doorway, and Tio learned things he hadn't known despite 14 months of knowing them. That the restaurant group had started with a single location Seo had opened at 24 with money borrowed from their grandmother. That Hwan had left a finance job in Seoul to come join Seo, which had required a level of trust and risk that Hwan described in 4 words. It seemed correct then, that somehow said everything. That June had been the last to come, and had brought with him a specific operational discipline that had turned 1 restaurant into 6 in 3 years. That they had never agreed on everything. That they argued sometimes, the 3 of them, with the particular intensity of people who loved each other too much to be dishonest. That they had lost 1 location during the pandemic and rebuilt it from the floor up, and that this had taught them something about starting over that Seo described simply as, you don't rebuild the same thing. You build what you know now. Tio listened to all of this. You don't rebuild the same thing, he repeated. No, Seo said. He made a final adjustment to the shelf, checked it with the level, and stepped back. You build what you know now. Shelf was up. It sat against the pale green-grey wall below the window, and it was exactly right, the length, the curve, the pale wood against the morning fog color. Hwan placed the rubber tree on the left end. Tio looked at it from the doorway. It's exactly right, he said. Hwan looked at it, then at Tio. He nodded, which from Hwan was the equivalent of a full sentence. They moved into the living room. June handed Tio his coffee and they settled, Seo in the armchair, Hwan and June on the couch. Tio in the wide chair beside the window where the morning light was coming in at an angle that fell exactly across the floor in a long pale stripe. The baby's room was visible from here, its door open, the shelf on the wall, the plant on the left end. Name, June said, not demanding, just remembering that he had been told Thursday. Tio wrapped both hands around his coffee cup. He looked at the room for a moment. River, he said. No one laughed. No one made the face that people sometimes made when they were deciding whether to approve or withhold approval of a name. Tio said it once, quietly, River, as though testing the weight of it. H1 nodded with his eyes on the floor, the private nod of someone adding information to a long, internal ledger. June looked at Tio with the reading expression, the one that was gathering and assessing, and then his face did something that it did very rarely. It settled, like something that had been slightly held released its hold. River, June said. River, Tio confirmed. The word sat in the room. It was a good word for a room with morning fog walls and a pale wood shelf and a dark-leafed plant and 4 people sitting in November light drinking coffee. It moved the right way. It did not end. Tio set down his cup. He looked at the 3 of them. 3 men who had driven in the rain, who had come to a party they were not invited to and stood in a room they did not belong to, and made Tio feel, for the first time in a very long time, like someone who did not have to manage everything alone. 3 men who had answered on the first ring and said when and where and had never once asked what was in it for them. He was not ready. He had told Zara he was not ready, and this was still true. There was too much that was too new, too much that had not yet found its shape. The grief was not finished. The practical landscape of his life, the apartment, the bakery, the baby, the winter, had not yet settled into its new configuration. But not being ready and understanding something were not the same thing. He understood something. He did not know yet what to do with the understanding, but he had it. He was keeping it carefully, the way you keep something you know is real but are not yet sure how to use. The way you keep a name before you're ready to say it out loud. He looked at the window, then at the door to the baby's room, then at the pale green-grey wall where River's shelf now lived. I want to ask you something, he said. All 3 of you, they were looking at him. Whatever this is, he said, gesturing slightly with one hand, not at any one of them, not at the room, at some middle space between all of it. Whatever this has been for 14 months, I don't want to pretend it's only what it looks like from the outside. I don't want to call it business contacts or colleagues or friends when those words are smaller than what it actually is. No one spoke. Not saying I know what it is, he continued. I'm saying I don't want to keep calling it the wrong name. He looked at June, then H1, then Seo. Is that something you understand, what I'm trying to say? June looked at him for a long moment, then he said, we've understood it for a long time. H1 said nothing. He looked at Tio in the way that H1 looked at things, fully and with the patience of a person who had no interest in looking away. Seo said, we were waiting for you to be ready to say it. Tio absorbed this. He looked down at his hands, then back up. I'm still not all the way ready, he said. That's fine, June said. River is due in 8 weeks. No, I don't know how any of this works. Neither do we, Seo said. We'll figure it out in the order it comes. Tio thought about this. He thought about painting a wall alone in the morning because some things needed to be done by yourself. He thought about a shelf going up in a room that was no longer a spare room. He thought about a name rising out of the noise and fitting perfectly in the dark. He thought about what it meant to build what you know now instead of rebuilding what you knew before. Okay, he said, just that, just the word. But it was not a small word. It was a door opening. And on the other side of it, not clearly yet, not completely, but genuinely the way things are genuine when they are built from accurate materials rather than wishful ones. Something was waiting that had room in it for Tio and for River and for 3 men who answered on the first ring. It was not finished being built, but it had started. The morning River was born. It was snowing, not the dramatic, cinematic snow that shuts down cities and makes the news. The quiet kind. The kind that falls without hurry and covers everything in the same pale, even layer and makes the world look, for a few hours, like it has been given back to itself. Tio noticed the snow at 4 in the morning, when he woke up with the first real contraction, and lay there for 2 minutes breathing through it, and then looked at the window and saw the white falling through the street lamp light and thought, of course it is snowing. He called Zara first because she had made him promise to call Zara first. She answered on the second ring, fully alert in the way only certain people can be fully alert at 4 in the morning, which was one of the things Tio had always loved about her. She said, I'm coming. She said, do not leave yet. She said, I'll be there in 20 minutes. She was there in 16. He called the triplets from the car on the way to the hospital. All 3 phones, 1 call, because that was still how they had given him the number, together. June answered. Tio said it's time. June said, we're already getting up. In the background, Tio could hear the movement, the quick, low conversation between 3 people organizing around a single fact, and he pressed his head back against the seat, and felt another contraction build and peak and pass, and the snow fell past the car window in its unhurried way. Dr. Renata Osai was already at the hospital when they arrived. She had that quality that the best medical professionals have, total calm that was not the absence of urgency but its absolute management. She looked at Tio, took his hand for a moment, and said, your body knows exactly what it's doing. He believed her. He was not sure why, but he believed her completely. Zara stayed in the room. She held his hand through the long middle hours, the ones where time becomes a different substance, where it stretches and compresses in ways that have nothing to do with clocks. She talked to him sometimes and was quiet with him other times, and when the quiet times needed to be very quiet, she was that too, with the complete fluency of a person who had made a study of what he needed, and was willing to provide all of it without being asked. The triplets were in the waiting area. Teo knew they were there the same way he knew things in the place below words, not because he could see them, but because the knowledge of them was steady and present and required no verification. June would be sitting upright. Hwan would be standing near the window. Sia would have found coffee from somewhere. At 7:41 in the morning, with snow still falling outside the hospital window, River was born, 7 pounds 4 ounces. Face that was both brand new to the world and somehow entirely recognizable, as if Teo's body had always known this particular configuration of features, and had simply been waiting for the introduction to become official. A sound that was brief and sharp, and then settled into breathing, just breathing, the pure uncomplicated work of a person who had just arrived, and was getting acquainted with the air. Teo held River against his chest, and his whole body went still in a way that had no fear in it. No grief, no calculation, just the full weight of a love that had no before to it and no after to it, that simply was all at once complete. He pressed his lips against the top of River's head. "Hi," he whispered. I know, I've got you." Zara was crying. She was not trying to hide it. She cried with the open fullness of someone who had been holding a great deal of feeling in a professional manner for a very long time and had finally been given permission to set it down. She leaned her forehead against Teo's shoulder, and he felt her shaking, and he put one arm around her while holding River with the other, and the three of them stayed like that in the white light of the hospital room with the snow falling outside, until Zara pulled back and looked at River, and said, "Oh my God, look at you," said with the reverence that very small new things inspire in people who love the person who made them. Dr. Osai came back, checked everything, said everything was exactly right, said get some sleep, which was the funniest thing anyone had said all morning, and went. Zara went to the waiting room. She said, "I'll send them in, but only if you want." And she left the question exactly where she put it, without pressure or opinion, which was the perfect thing to do. Teo looked at River. River was asleep. Already 4 minutes old and already deeply committed to the practice of rest. "Okay," he said to the room, to himself, to the snow outside. When the door opened, they came in together. Not in a line. Together, the way they were in parking lots and restaurants and bakeries and kitchens and hospital waiting rooms, without arrangement, without deciding, simply because this was how they moved when something mattered. June stopped 3 steps into the room. Hwan stopped beside him. Sia was last, and he closed the door behind him quietly, with the care of someone making sure that whatever was inside this room stayed inside it, protected from the hallway and the world. They looked at Teo, then they looked at River. And Teo watched 3 men who were precise and composed and deeply capable in every circumstance he had ever seen them in. 3 men who had driven in rain and answered on the first ring, and put up a shelf on a Thursday morning, and waited through 7:41 minutes of snow-covered waiting room without asking for updates. He watched these 3 men look at his 7-pound 4-ounce child, and go completely quiet in the way that certain things make certain people quiet. The way that irreversible things do. June moved first. He came to the side of the bed and looked at River with the reading expression that Teo had always associated with June measuring something important. But this was different from that. This was not measurement. This was recognition. "River," June said softly. "River," Teo confirmed. Hwan stood at the foot of the bed. He was not looking at River. He was looking at Teo in the full, patient way that Hwan looked at things he decided to see completely. There was something in his expression that was not performed and not managed and not composed for anyone's benefit. It was just present. It was just real. It sat in the room without asking for acknowledgement and was the more powerful for it. Teo came to the other side of the bed. He looked at River for a long time without speaking. Then he said very quietly to Teo specifically, "You did that." Words, plain and direct and without any extra material. And somehow those 3 words reached all the way back through 7 months and an engagement party and a hotel parking lot and a bakery in the early morning with the wrong flowers in the window, and gathered up everything that had happened between then and now, and placed it in front of Teo in a way he could finally look at clearly. He had done that, all of it. Every choice, every step, every morning he had gotten up and folded the tissue paper and pressed his hand against his belly and told himself it was fine when it wasn't fine. And then the night when he stopped telling himself that, and every day since he had done all of that, and what he had built from it was this room, this pale winter morning, this child, these 3 men standing around him with no agenda and no performance and no second phone. He looked at River. River slept with the complete confidence of someone who had already decided the world was safe. Small fists loose, breathing even, the whole future of a whole person condensed into 7 pounds and a face that was still deciding which of its features to keep. Teo thought about what Seo had said 3 weeks ago in the baby's room. You don't rebuild the same thing. You build what you know now. He knew some things now that he had not known at the beginning of this year. He knew that the feeling of something being wrong was not overthinking. It was the body's oldest intelligence, and it deserved to be listened to. He knew that the people worth keeping in your life were the ones who showed up before you had finished deciding whether to ask them. He knew that love was not always the word that fit the thing you were feeling. Sometimes it was presence. Sometimes it was a shelf on a Thursday. Sometimes it was one ring, answered immediately, and the sound of chairs being pushed back. He knew that starting over was not the tragedy it looked like from inside the grief of it. He knew his child's name. He looked at June. Then Hwan, then Seo. Thank you, he said, for the last time, for everything. June looked at him with an expression that had no walls in it anymore. Stop thanking us, Teo said. Hwan made a sound in the back of his throat that was as close to a laugh as Hwan produced. Seo looked at the window. Outside, the snow was slowing. The sky behind it was beginning to shift toward the pale luminous white that comes just before actual light breaks through, the color of something about to open. River stirred, just slightly. Not waking, just shifting, the small unconscious adjustments of a person in the middle of deep rest. Teo looked down. He pressed his finger into River's palm, and River's hand, without waking, without intention, closed around it, that grip. That small, absolute, total grip. Teo exhaled. Long and slow and completely. He was not the same person who had stood at a bakery counter at 7 in the morning with wrong flowers in the window, an address he wasn't sure about, and a phone face down on the marble, and a feeling he kept trying to name. That person had done what he needed to do. That person had driven past the turn and found the truth, and walked into a room and put a ring on a bar and walked out in the rain. And this person, the one sitting in a hospital bed in the snow with River's hand around his finger and 3 men standing quietly around him, this person had been built from everything that came after. He was not finished being built, but he had the materials now. He had the right materials. River breathed, and the snow outside went still. And the light behind it began, slowly and without announcement, to come through. Thank you so much for watching all the way to the end of this story. If River's first breath moved something in you, if Tia's courage made you sit up a little straighter, if watching someone choose themselves and their child over everything that tried to diminish them reminded you of your own strength, then this story did exactly what it was made to do. Drop a comment below and tell us, what was the one moment in this story that hit you the hardest? Was it the parking lot, the ring on the bar, or was it River's hand closing around Tia's finger in the snow? Your thoughts are not just comments, they are part of what keeps stories like this alive. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today, someone who is in the middle of their own hard choice. Someone who needs to know that walking away from what hurts and walking toward what holds you is not weakness, it is the whole point. And if you are new here, subscribe right now and turn on your notifications. Because this channel is built for the stories that stay with you, the ones that make you feel something real and remind you that the people worth keeping in your life are the ones who answer on the first ring. There is another story coming that will reach you somewhere you did not expect. Do not miss it. Subscribe, turn it on, and come back because we are just getting started.